Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to show you a quick tutorial on how I paint a squirrel in an oak tree. And this is from a picture I took recently on a nature walk, and I was looking up into the trees to see if I could see any owls, and actually there's a little napping squirrel. It was so cute. So I'm just going to do a little sort of sketchbook watercolor study of it for my October nature notes. And if you're interested in seeing how I do that, then keep on watching. So here's the picture of the squirrel sleeping in the oak tree, and this is from a recent walk I took. So here is the project. I sketched out the tree and the squirrel, and then just sort of added some oak leaves in. I think the tree might be a fir tree in the picture, but there's oak trees surrounding and you can see the leaves, so I'm just making it an oak tree for the illustration. And I'm wetting around the outside of the drawing because I want this to be a circle, and I want all the edges of the paint on the outside of the circle to sort of bleed out and just sort of fade away. And this is really reminiscent of something like a Beatrix Potter illustration. She did that technique a lot, and I find it really cool, so I'm thinking I'll try it out for my nature notes. Now that I have the sky painted, I'm going to start on the tree. So I made sure that the outside of the circle here is wet, so you may have to re-wet it with your brush before you start painting. Then I'm using a grayish brown, and I'm just painting around the outside first, so I get that sort of soft bleeded edge. And then I'll start into the actual tree and creating the tree bark after I have that finished. Now I am just wetting select areas of the tree with my clean damp brush. So I'm not putting a wash over the entire tree, I'm just wetting areas along the lines that I made. And then I'm going to drop paint in along those lines so that they don't spread over the entire area, so that I can kind of get that textural look for tree bark without the paint going into all the white areas. Now I'm putting a clean water wash over the squirrel's tail, and I made sure the tree and the sky are completely dry before starting this, and I'm just dropping in some grayish brown, leaving a few white spaces so it can sort of softly create its own textural look. And I'm just dropping that in, and I'm using a number 4 round brush for most of this painting. Now I'm going to start onto the leaves, so I'm going to make a clean water wash over top, and then I'm going to use some orangish yellow brown mixes, about 3 different mixes of color, to drop in the fall colors onto the oak leaves. Again, I'm going to leave some white spaces so that the entire leaf is not painted. This is the trick to watercolor. So I'm just dropping it in using my number 4 brush, and then I'll also just draw a line up the midrib with my brush while the paint is still damp, or sorry, while the paper is still damp. Now that the tail of the squirrel is dry, I'm going to start on the body of the squirrel, and I'm just going to do the body and leave the head to do separately. So I'm just wetting the body all over with clean damp water. Now I'm taking my grayish brown and dropping in some color, leaving white spaces. And I'm dropping in kind of little curved lines around where the haunches of the back legs and the front leg elbow is, to kind of start building some definition there. And then I'm also making sure that I've got some areas around the outside nice and defined. Now I'm just dropping in a bit of reddish brown, a different color for my palette. I think this is brown madder, and that's just because there's a little bit of a reddish spot on the squirrel's tummy. And that area has pretty much dried right next to the head, so I'm going to wet that with clean water now and start painting the squirrel head, just with the same grayish brown mix. And it's just a bit more gray than the tree bark, so it's the same mix, the tree bark leaning towards brown, the squirrel leaning towards gray. And this is a pretty easy little squirrel to paint. Because his head is kind of tucked away to the side, you just see sort of the back of its head and an ear. So you don't have to worry about adding any details like eyes or the nose for this painting. Now I'm making sure everything is nice and dry with my hairdryer before I move on to the next step. Now I'm adding on the bit more detail around the legs. So I'm doing wet on dry for this and just adding a bit of a line around the front and back legs and cleaning my brush out and then softening the inner edge and leaving the other edge hard. Now I'm painting a tiny little oval with darker paint to represent the inside of the ear. And now I carry on making some definitions with using wet on dry and then softening with a clean brush till I feel like I have enough light and dark and definition. Now I'm starting with the tree branch. I'm using wet on dry to create more definition and shadow on the underside of the branch. And again, I'm just using wet on dry and then a clean damp brush to blend out the inner edge. Now I'm moving on to darkening the bark on the tree. So I'm using the same technique, wet on dry, and I'm leaving some gaps and spaces just because I don't want to cover up my entire first wash. And then I cleaned out my brush and you can see I just dragged it down to blend that color out, and then leaving the gaps gives a really nice effect for depth and dimension. Now I'm going back to the leaves and I'm using wet on dry again, and I'm just going to use my smaller brush. This is a size 00, and I'm painting the midribs with a darker reddish brown. And then I will just paint in little wispy side veins as well that match up with the lobes of the oak leaves. Now I'm going back to the squirrel to add further definition, and I'm just kind of stippling in some darker color with my small brush. And I will add more definition to the tail as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And you can hit the bell icon beside subscribe to get a notification when I post new videos. And if you want more information on the online school that I've just launched, you can head over to my website, lauraashton.ca, and check that out and preview my new class, Watercolor Botanicals for Beginners, for free.